Alright guys, welcome to another video of our React tutorial. In our last video we talked about navigating from one screen to another, also how we can navigate from sign up page to our profile page and passing the data through the use navigate to our new page. So in this video we're going to talk about how to protect our pages from unauthorized users. So what do we mean? We're making sure before you can access any resource or any page, you must be authenticated. So we're going to talk about role-based routing in React.js. So to achieve this, we're just going to do three things. One, we're going to protect routes based on authentication. Two, we're going to redirect users who are not logged in. And three, we're going to implement role-based access control to restrict certain pages on users' role, right? So we're going to do these three things and we're going to do it right away. But before we proceed, let's find out why this particular concept is very important. You see, some pages should only be accessed when logged in. Like if you have a closed system, a social media platform, you can only make a post or see someone's post or like or comment when you're logged in, right? And so for some systems, admins may need access to different routes than regular user. What the admin sees most times is different from what the regular user sees. So that is why we try to protect the route. And also unauthorized users should be redirected to either log in or sign up automatically, right? This is also to protect our route from regular visitors. So this is where we stopped from our previous class, where we created the sign up page, the login page, and the profile page. So to achieve our goal today, the first thing we're going to do is to set up our authentication context. We talked about use context hook in our previous video. You can go back to it to refresh your mind and come back to continue with us. So here I'm going to go over to my source folder. I'm going to create a folder called state. Inside my state, I'm going to create a file called auth-context.jsx. Right, so this is where I'm going to set up my authentication context. So inside of here, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to import few things. So I'm going to import create context. I'm going to import create context. I'm going to import use context. And I'm going to import use state. I'm going to import all of these from React, right? That is the first thing I'm going to do. And secondly, I'm going to import one more thing. Sorry about that. I'm going to import use navigate. We talked about use navigate in our last video, and I'm going to import it from React router DOM, right? So after that, the next thing I'm going to do is to initialize my auth context. So I'm going to say const auth context is going to be, of course, the create context we imported, right? I'm going to initialize my create context here. And next, I'm going to export something. So watch out what I'm exporting. I'm exporting my auth provider. We did all of this in our previous video. We talked about use context hook. You can always go back to it to know what we did. I'm going to do auth provider, which is of course going to have children. All right, I hope you don't forget that. So yeah, this is going to be an arrow function. Yes, if we do this, the first thing we're going to do, we're going to excuse me, we're going to create a user state. We're going to use our use state hook to create a user state. I'm going to say const user, and I'm going to have the setter should be equal to use state, and its default value is going to be null. All right, after this, I'm going to initialize my use navigate. I'm going to say const navigate should be equal to use navigate. Remember, we imported use navigate before now. So now I'm going to create my login context. So up next, I'm going to create my login function. I'm going to say const login should be equal to an arrow function. Right, inside of this login, we are expecting two parameters. We're expecting the user data, of course, let's just say the username, and of course we're expecting the role. This role is telling us the kind of user that's logging in to our system, right? So the first thing we're going to do in this function is to set our user. We're going to set our user to the name, and we're going to set it to the role. These two properties, right? The first property, the name, and the second property, the role. After we do that, we're going to use our local storage. We're going to store this data in our local storage. We're going to say local storage dot set item. What are we setting? We're setting a value called user, and after that we're saying JSON. We're going to stringify the value we want to save. Stringify. And what are we stringifying? We're stringifying the name and the role, right? So how this works is that before you can save a data in your local storage only accepts strings. Before you can save it, you need to convert your data to a string before you save. So when you're retrieving it from your local storage, now you pass the data to the actual value or actual data type that you want it to be, right? So I'm going to attach a link to a video where you can learn about local storage, everything you need to know about local storage. If it's the first time you're coming across local storage, pause, watch the video, and come back to continue. So having done all of this, what's the next thing to do? The next thing I'm going to do is to navigate to my dashboard, right? So I'm going to say navigate. Remember, I already initialized, created a variable where we initialize, use navigate. So we're just going to navigate to somewhere. But we'll go back to our app.jsx. We have a profile already, so we are navigating to our profile. So when you log in, set the user, save the user to local storage, and take the user to the profile. That is all for the login function. But then we need to also create our logout function. So we're going to create const logout is equal to an arrow function, of course. All right, so logout is not expecting any parameter because we're not saving any data. And what are we doing here? We're just setting the user to null, which is the default value of the user when nothing is there. Saving it back to null, and we're removing the user from the local storage. We're saying local storage, sorry, it's supposed to be local storage dot remove item. So what item are we removing? We're passing in the key, which from here we save the key as user. We're also removing the key as user. And when we log out, take the user back to the login page. So we're saying navigate to, let's make sure we have it here as, here we have it as the base URL. So we're just going to say take me back to the base URL. So that is it for these two functions. One will be a login and one will be a logout. So after that, we're going to return our auth context provider, right? We're going to return our auth context provider. So return auth context dot provider, right, which is going to have a value. Our value is going to be the user, the data we are saving, the action, the two actions. The first action is the login action. The second action is the logout, is the logout action, right? These are the data we're going to pass in through this auth context provider. And this is going to have all the children, going to wrap it around all the children. And that is it for here. After that, the next thing we're going to do is just to export a const, and we say use auth. We're going to create this. All right, we're going to do this. Say use context. Use context, and what use context are we using? We're using the, what context are we using? Rather, we're using the auth context, right? So we're exporting use auth, as our use context, and we're passing the context we're exporting, which is the auth context. Right, so that is it for this page. Our auth context .jsx, we're not supposed to import this. Right, so we imported all of this from React, router DOM. We initialize our create context, and we exported our auth provider here, where we have our actions, 2 actions. We have our states, and we have our auth context provider here. So the next thing we're going to do, guys, is to create a protected route component. We're going to create a protected route a component that's going to help us protect our route. So we'll just go to our component page, and we're going to create a file, and we're going to call this file protected route.jsx. We're going to save. So what are we doing in this page? Actually, we're just using this page to protect our route, to make sure to check if the user is logged in. If not, they should be redirected to login. If they don't have the right role, they should be sent to an unauthorized page, and all of that. So this is just going to hold all of those logic. So the first thing we're going to do here is to import a component called navigate from React router DOM. We're going to say import navigate from React router DOM, and next we're going to import our use auth from our auth context, right? We're going to say import use auth from our auth context. So after that, we're going to create a component called protected route. We're going to say const protected route is equal to an arrow function. This arrow function is expecting 2 parameters, right? It's expecting an element parameter, and it's expecting allowed rows. Right? As we proceed, we're going to see the use cases for this. So the first thing we're going to do for this component is to initialize our use auth. So we're going to say const user, which are the values we expected from this. We're going to say const user is equal to use auth, right? We're going to initialize the use auth. After that, we're just going to say if not user. So if there is no user passed in, it means there is no user accessing, there is no user saved in our memory. So the person coming in is not authorized to come in. We're just going to return. We're going to return the navigate component we imported from React router DOM, and we're saying navigate to this, right? So this is a self-closed component. This is supposed to be a component, yes. So why are we going back to this? Because we said our base URL should be our login. So if there is no user, take them back to login, right? And we're also going to do some other check. We're going to say if we're going to check if the person logging in is not allowed to log in. We're going to say if allowed rows and not allowed rows, right? Includes user.role, right? If this, I'm going to explain this. This is not correct. If allowed rows and not allowed rows, okay, yeah. So what are we going to do here? We're just going to return our navigate, and we're returning you back to unauthorized page, which we're going to create. So we're going to say not allowed, unauthorized, right? Whoever is accessing this profile, accessing that profile page, is not allowed to be, or is not an admin. Take them back to a page for an unauthorized person. We're going to create this page as we proceed. So after that, the next thing we're going to do is to return our element, whatever the element is, and we're going to export this as default. We're going to say export default. What are we exporting? We're exporting our protected route, guys. So that is it for our protected route. This component checks if the user is logged in, just like I said earlier. If not, they are redirected to login page. If they don't have the right access, if they're not admin, they are redirected to unauthorized page. So the next thing we're going to do is to set up our role-based route. We're going to integrate protected route into our routing system, and we're going to do that in our app.jsx, right? So inside of here, instead of having just our profile, we're going to only navigate to profile if you are authorized to do so, right? So I'm going to drop a comment. I'm going to say protecting our routes. So here I'm going to have two routes. I'm going to call this profile and I'm going to call this dashboard, right? We're going to create a component for this dashboard. We're just going to replicate what we have in the profile page, right? So I'm going to create in the page, I'm going to create dashboard.jsx, and I'm just going to paste everything I have in the profile. But here I'm going to have it here as I'm going to have a h3 element that's going to specify dashboard, right? And I'll do the same thing for the profile. I'm going to have a h3 element that's going to tell us that this is profile. So I'm going to paste this and I'm going to say profile. So if I do all of this and I save everything, go back to app.jsx. So what are we doing here? We're saying we have a route and the path is a profile and we have an element. So we are going to protect our element, right? How do we protect our element? We're first of all going to say, we're going to call our protected route. We're going to call our protected route. We imported our protected route already, right? Our protected route is going to have an element. The element now is going to be our profile, profile component rather. So this is going to be correct, and we're going to pass in another parameter. And what's the parameter we're going to pass in our protected route? We're going to pass a parameter called allowed rows, right? Allowed rows. We're going to pass in two properties. The first property is we're going to pass in one property that is an array of two elements. The first element of the array is going to be the user, right? And second element is going to be admin. So these are the only people allowed to use this application. It's either you're using it as a user or you're using it as an admin, right? In our dashboard route, we're going to call just like we did earlier, we're going to call our protected route. Right, inside our protected route, we're going to have our element. We're going to skip that and come back to that later. Right, and our element, we're also going to have allowed rows. In the allowed rows, we're only going to allow admins, right? We're only going to allow admins because only admins should have access to the dashboard. So why did we leave the element here blank? We'll go back to our dashboard and we're going to export the component as default export, and we're going to have it as admin panel, right? If we save this, so we're going to import the admin panel as the element of the dashboard route, right? So if we do that, we import admin panel from the dashboard and we'll come over here to complete it. So guys, this is what we did. We created we modified our route, added a new route, which is dashboard, and we implemented the protected route, making sure only users and admin can accept the profile, but only admin can accept the dashboard. So what's the next thing we're going to do? The next thing we're going to do is to implement the login component, right? We're going to make changes to our login pages to make sure when you log in, the data you're logging in is saving in our state, in our local storage. So let's go back to our login page. let's go over to our login.jsx. We already have our login.jsx, and we're just going to make some modifications. We're going to import our login action, and we're going to trigger the action when we click a button. But first, we're going to simulate two things. We're going to have two buttons, right? Two buttons. One button is going to log in as admin. The other button is going to log in as a user, right? So this button is going to be login as admin, and this button is going to be login as user. So if we save these two, we're good. And we're also going to do one more thing. We're going to import our use auth. We're going to import our use auth, and we're going to initialize it. So let's just head over to initializing it. It will help us to import it. So we're going to say const login. Remember our login action we created. Const login is equal to use auth, and we're going to import use auth from our auth context, right? Auth context. So with this, I think we'll proceed to call this login action. So where we have our login controller, let our login controller accept a parameter, and this parameter we're going to call it type, right? Our login controller is going to accept a parameter called type, right? So how do we pass in this parameter here? We're going to call this function, and we're going to pass in the first type is user login, right? User login. And the second type, sorry, this is supposed to be login as user, yeah, user login. The first type is going to be admin login. So we're going to say admin login. So if we do this, we go back to the function. We're now going to say if type, if the type we created is equal to admin login, right? We're going to do something, and else, sorry, if it's equal to admin login, we're going to do something. Else, we're also going to do something. So what's the first thing we're going to do here? We're going to log in. We're going to call the login action. We're going to call the login action. The login action is expecting two parameters. If we go back to our auth context, we see that our login action is expecting two parameters, the user name and the role, right? So here we already have a state which is holding our login data, right? We already have a state holding our login data, do we? Let's find out. So we have here, okay, we don't, so we're going to create that. We're going to create a state that will hold our login. We're going to create a state that will hold our user input, and we're going to use the user input to pass in here. So the first thing we're going to do here is to say, first thing we're going to do here is to create a state, say const username. From our input, what we have email and password. So let's just have this as username and password. All right, so we're going to say const username, set username should be equal to useState, and it's going to have an empty string. Let's make sure we import our useState. Yeah, we import our useState from React. Make sure you do that. And we're going to do the same thing for the password. I'm going to say this is going to be our password, and this is going to be set password. Right. So if we do this, we are saying if your login type is admin login, you're going to log in the user, and you're going to call in admin user, right? We're going to call in the admin user. Of course, here we're expecting just name. We're going to call in first parameter is going to be the name, which is the username, and the second parameter is going to be the type of user logging in, and we're saying admin, because in our auth context, in our protected route rather, yes, here we are saying only an authorized user is going to be allowed, right? Only an authorized user is going to be allowed. If you go back to our app.jsx, we're saying if you're a user or an admin, you can access the profile, but if you're only admin, that is when you can only admin can access the dashboard. So going back to the login, we're passing these two parameters, right? So what's the next thing we're going to do in our else block? We're just going to repeat this, but we're going to pass in a different parameter in the second, different value in the second parameter. We're going to say this to be user. So if you're an admin, log in as admin. If you're not an admin, log in as a user. So we're going to take out this because this is already taken care of in our auth context. It's already navigating to our profile, so that is not a problem anymore. So let's set the values of our input before we forget. This is supposed to be ID. Let's name this username, right? And let's give it example. Enter your username. Enter your username. So let's give this an event listener. Let's say on change, we're going to have E. So e.target.value is going to be the value of our set username, right? So we're going to do this. It's going to be the value of our set username. We can also do the same thing for the password. We're going to say this is going to be set password e.value.target.value. So if we save this and just make sure everything is working perfectly from the login page and the password page. So let's just say, let's give this a value, and let's also give the username input a value. It should be username. Right. So remember one thing, when we are talking about our app.jsx, we said we're going to create a route which is going to be for unauthorized. If you go back to our protected route, we have a route called unauthorized. So we're going to create this route. We're going to create this route unauthorized, and we're going to create a component for it, right? We're just going to go to our pages and say unauthorized or something. So we're going to create a page called unauthorized.jsx. So in our unauthorized.jsx, we're just going to export a function. We're going to export default. We're going to export default function unauthorized, and we're just going to return a div that's going to hold our h2 element. The h2 is going to just say access denied, right? Access denied. What should you do next? Let's just add a text to be to at least be okay. Say you do not have permission. You do not have permission. You do not have permission to view this page, right? This is all we're doing for this, and we'll go back to our app.jsx where we have our unauthorized path. We're just going to call the unauthorized. We're going to call the unauthorized components unauthorized. So let's do this unauthorized. All right, imported from our pages. So after doing this, let's make sure everything is working perfectly. Yes, everything is okay. Since everything is okay, let's start up our application and test out what we did and see how how routes are protected from unauthorized users. So we're going to run our app. We're going to say npm run dev. It's going to open our app in port 5173. if we open this in our browser, we're going to see a blank page, right? Let's inspect and see where the error is coming from, and we're going to fix the error together. So here we're saying uncaught type error, cannot destructure property login of auth this in as it is undefined at login page. So what is causing this? Because we did not wrap our app.js with our auth provider, just like we did when we discussed use context hook. So we're going to do that by wrapping this with auth provider, right? We're going to wrap this with auth provider, and we're going to save. We'll save this and go back to our app. We'll reload. We're going to have a different error. Say use navigate may be used only in the context of a router component, right? Use navigate. This error is coming from auth context.js in line 8. Let's inspect this and see what's happening here. So if we go to our auth context, we go to line 8, we're saying, so we are initializing use navigate in this page, in this file, but they say the use navigate can only be used in the context of a router. So how do we solve this problem? We're going to solve this problem by wrapping, instead of wrapping our router, which is of course our browser router, instead of wrapping our browser router in our app.jsx, we're going to wrap it in our main.jsx, right? We're going to wrap it, sorry, this is supposed to be this. We're going to wrap it in our main.jsx. This is our main.jsx. So where we have strict mode wrapping our app, we're going to have our browser router, of course, import browser router from router. If we do that, we're going to wrap it around, we're going to use it to wrap around all of this. Right. So if we do this and save, this should solve our problem. If we go back to application, now we have our page running, right? So if I put in my name and I put in my password and I click on admin login, it takes me to profile page, right? It takes me to profile. Let's see our profile and make sure our profile is fine. So it takes me to profile, right? If I do the same thing and I click on login as user profile, if I click on admin login, it takes me to profile. This is because if we go to our app.jsx, we said either you are an admin or you're a user, you'll be able to access the profile page. But then only admin can access the dashboard page. Let's try that out. Let's go back to our auth context and change this to dashboard. Right. So when we click on our login, take us to dashboard. If I put in my name and I put in the password and I click on user, it takes me to access denied page, which means a user cannot access the dashboard. Only admin can access the dashboard. Let's check this out. If you're an admin, let's see if admin can have access to it. Let's do this. Let me put in my name. Let me click on as admin. Now admin has access to dashboard. So guys, that is how to create a protected route, protecting your pages from users that are not authorized to access them. So a recap of what we did: we use our use context to store data, which of course is our authentication data, which the username, and we're also storing the role of who is trying to access our page. We also created a protected route to manage restricted accesses. We redirect user based on their role using navigate, and also store authentication data in local storage. So that is it for this video. Please like, comment, subscribe. Thank you for watching. See you guys in the next video. Bye.